Shaping Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'm back from Strasbourg. I managed to escape in one piece. There was no horse's head in my bed this morning when I woke up, and it's good to be back in London. And we're not discussing Trump, we're not discussing immigration, we're not discussing Article 50 or our close personal friends in the European Union and in particular Parliament. No, something else has really caught the imagination today. And it's a man from the Isle of Wight, John Platt, who took his daughter out of school to go off to Disney and finished up getting a fixed penalty notice. You know, the sort of things you get when you get caught speeding or whatever it is, because he had not sought permission to take his daughter out of school during term time. And he finished up going to the Magistrates' Court. And he won. But the Department of Education, I guess fearing that there might be sort of a free-for-all of people taking their kids out of school. And last year, there were 20,000 cases in which local authorities took parents to the Magistrates' Court for taking their kids out of school during term time. I guess fearing that, they took this all the way through the High Court and all the way up to the Supreme Court, where this morning Lady Hale gave us a warning that unauthorised school absences are disruptive. Here is Lady Hale.
Any educational system expects people to keep the rules. Not to do so is unfair to those obedient parents who do keep the rules, whatever the cost or inconvenience to themselves.
Well, John Platt was not particularly pleased about this, and speaking to LBC earlier today, this is his reaction to the verdict.
When there's a dispute between a head teacher and a parent over what is valuable for a child, whose decision should be final? Even if the parent's wrong, I'm on their side. You're the child's parent, you're the person there late at night, you know that child in a way that no other person does, and you should be able to make that decision without the state coming along and saying, you're wrong about that.
So some big issues there that John Platt raises: the power of the state, the ability of a parent to decide what is right and what is wrong, the power of fixed penalties to be handed down to us, whatever we do, it seems sometimes. So there are some big issues here, and I guess ultimately the discretion that head teachers should or should not have in these situations. So look, get involved with this debate. I know it's really fired the public's imagination today. If you think this judge has absolutely got it spot on, then call me now on 0345 6060 973 if you completely understand why some parents, because it's just that much cheaper to get a plane to Florida or wherever it may be, and you have some sympathy with John Platt, then text me on 84850. And if you think it's ridiculous that this should have gone all the way to the Supreme Court, well, you can tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage at LBC, and you can watch me live on LBC's Facebook page right now. Let's go to Adam in Sittingbourne. Adam, would you take your children out of school during term time to go on holiday?
Yes, I'm afraid, Nigel, I'd be a very naughty boy and probably do that. Yeah, as long as my child is doing good at school, is attaining the grades, doesn't need any special help, and has general good attendance above 90%, I honestly do not see the problem. And this ruling today should spark concern across everybody, people who even have got kids, because it is the state declaration, as I see it, as war on parents, telling us that they think they know better how to bring our children up. And it's how revolutions start, as far as I'm concerned.
Whoa, strong stuff. Strong stuff from Sittingbourne. Adam, do you know, when I heard this story this morning, my initial reaction was, well, of course, there have to be rules, and parents can't ride completely roughshod over the school timetable, and you've got to maintain some sense of discipline within a school, otherwise there might be no one there. And that was my sort of first reaction. And the more I thought about this, and the more I realised the utter determination of the Department of Education to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, the power of John Platt's argument that actually his daughter had I think it was a 92% attendance record and was doing well at school, the more I came to the same point of view as you, Adam. I think we were sort of in a world where the state starts to tell parents how they should bring kids up and what is right and what is wrong. That is pretty Orwellian. And I'm not going to say this will lead to a revolution, but it certainly is the state, isn't it? And they do this, of course, with the BBC licence fee and with many other things.
They do it with everything, Nigel. They do it with everything. Anything, their ideology. It seems like these people in charge have an ideology and which the masses don't want, and they force it upon us. And that's the way I see it. And this is just an attack on ordinary parents. As far as I'm concerned, the bloke didn't do anything wrong. And then the only evidence that the Department of Education was relying on said that there was actually a positive of children having holidays with their parents. I mean, what about those parents who can't get some holidays?
Well, that's right.
Because they got a job.
That's absolutely right. Adam, you've made your point absolutely beautifully. And I must say, the one thing that does surprise me a little bit with this judgment is that right at the start of this judgment it says, this case is all about the meaning of the word regularly. Namely, did John Platt regularly take his daughter out of school so that it was perhaps appropriate for a sanction of some kind to be put upon him as a parent, in this case, as I say, a dreaded fixed penalty notice, but I guess there has to be a sanction of some kind, and it's quite difficult to see actually how he's lost at the Supreme Court, given that his daughter had a 92% attendance record. I mean, I have to say, you could be a rubbish parent, couldn't you? You could not give a damn about how your kids are doing. You could show no interest in what they're doing at school. You could never even ask a question about homework, and all parents know you probably get quite a sharp response when you do, like, we haven't got any, or I've done it, or but you could be one of those parents who simply couldn't care less. You aren't particularly bothered that they turn up for school late on a regular basis. You allow them to take days off sick when it's not particularly appropriate. But don't worry, as long as you don't take your kids out of school, to go and visit the pyramids or do something that actually could be perhaps really life-changing and exciting, you won't get fined. Or you could be a really good, keen parent. You help and encourage your children with their homework. You support the school and much of its ethos and explain to your child why actually this is the way things happen, this is the way things work. You could help your kids to be organised and ready for the next morning so they turn up on time with the right books. That does take some real parenting skills in my experience. You could be somebody who, because of shift work, simply cannot get time off at the time kids are going to be on holiday, and you could actually be very hard up. And maybe you want to take your son or daughter or both of them away for a week somewhere. It might be the one big holiday they get in 5 years or 10 years. But in that case, you get fined. So it seems to me a lot of this is about discretion. I'm asking you whether you think the Supreme Court have been reasonable, and I have to say I've now formed the view that actually they have not been reasonable. There could have been a case that had gone to the Supreme Court where clearly a parent had been negligent in many ways and utterly disrespected school rules in terms of time off, and then perhaps Lady Hale would have been justified in what she said. I can't see that John Platt actually comes into the category of being a bad parent. So, I want your view. Do you think it's a fair and reasonable judgment? Remember, 0345 6060 973, and let me know what you think. And also, I'm appealing. Headmasters, headmistresses, does this ruling by the Supreme Court effectively take away your ability to use your discretion? Does it impinge upon that? Because that, I think, is ultimately going to be the most interesting result of this case. And I'm going to ask Helen in Luton. Helen, is this a fair and reasonable judgment?
Well, hello, Nigel. I think it should be decided on the individual schools. They should decide on a case-by-case basis because certain circumstances should be taken into consideration.
Yep.
I mean, I want to give an example of me as a child, going over 40 years ago. My parents used to take my brothers and I across Europe, travelling across Europe for 8 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
And we used to come back 2 weeks late for the beginning of the new year in September. And I felt so out of sorts because I was behind with everything for 2 weeks. Even though I loved my fabulous holiday, I personally would have preferred 2 weeks less so I wouldn't feel that way when I went back to school.
Well, Helen, I think the point we're arguing here is it's not about parents that just regularly abuse the whole thing. Perhaps they do deserve a sanction of some kind. And the argument of certainly a child missing the first 2 weeks of the academic year, they really have missed a very, very important part, of their education. The argument, Helen, isn't about that. The argument is about a parent who appears to be a parent that actually cares about his daughter's education, who, makes sure she turns up on time, she's doing well in lessons.
What I said originally, I think the schools, individual schools, should decide on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I do too, Helen. I do too, and thank you for that point. And I repeat the call. Headmasters, headmistresses, anonymous, if you think it helps your situation, does this judgment from the Supreme Court take away some of your discretion? And just to be clear, who this actually applies to, this ruling applies to England only. Okay, education is a devolved matter, so Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, this ruling does not apply to you. Who knows, Gibraltar could be in that list soon if they listen to me. It doesn't apply, of course, to private schools. So parents there won't be given fixed penalty notices, but they might find there's an argument with the headmaster or the headmistress. And it doesn't apply to that group of people, of course, who homeschool. Something I think that the authorities take a pretty dim view of. But for the rest of you, in England, for the sort of 94% of children who go to state schools in England, this applies to you. I've got Maud from Bude texts me here and says, I wish my primary head teacher had taken his holidays in term time so I could teach without his hindrance. I quite like that. Go on holiday more locally, says Harry in West Yorkshire. West Yorkshire people, Harry, always practical to a fault. The Dales, of course, are wonderful. And I do get that point, Harry, but I don't know whether going to, Disneyland, Disney World is now a rite of passage or not, I don't know, but it could well be that there are circumstances where a child might be able to go with a parent who's off on a business trip or travelling to some remote part of the world. It just might broaden that child's horizons. It is possible. An anonymous text that says the court was right. Keyword, obedient parents. Very worrying. Good show already, says Kieran in Belfast. Yes, obedient parents. And I think, we go back to our first caller this evening who said he hadn't got any children, but was actually quite worried that the state wants to have this level of power, and the Supreme Court, in this case, really judging how parents effectively should bring up their children. This ruling is perverse. Why does it not apply to private schools? If it is so important, it should apply to all schools. Lots and lots of different points of view. I'm asking you, is that Supreme Court ruling this morning fair and reasonable? I'm not so sure that it is. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15.
Weeknights on LBC start with Nigel Farage from 7, and from 10, Ian Collins.
Why are they not being protected just because Jenny Murray has a view on what makes up a trans woman?
Trans people getting harassed, they're getting...
She's not some mad homophobe or genderphobe, is she, or transphobe?
Leading Britain's conversation. Weeknights on LBC.
The secret's out. Ray Morris Automatic Cars have been selling cars for over 50 years. With ultra-low mileage automatic cars from £5,000 to £25,000, they have the make and model to suit your budget. Ray Morris Automatic Cars in South East London, 10 minutes from the Dartford Tunnel. With over 300 automatic cars actually in stock, buy one today and drive it away. AutomaticCarSpecialist.com, the not-so-secret home of automatic cars.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 83222.
PPI Hotline, text WIN to 83222. The best place for sleepyheads is in the Bridge Bedding bed.
At Bridge Bedding, we have hundreds of beds and mattresses in stock from the biggest brands in the UK. We'll beat any price on a like-for-like basis, and we'll deliver for free. So before you buy your next new bed, visit a Bridge Bedding Centre, Rectory Groveley-on-Sea, Upminster Road, Hornchurch, or online at bridgebedding.com.
The best place for sleepyheads is in a Bridge Bedding bed.
The trouble with investing in cash ISAs these days is that you never seem to get a decent return. With today's high inflation and low interest rates, your money just doesn't reach its potential. At Money Farm, our experts can match you with an investment ISA that could give your money the chance to perform better. And right now, you could have your full ISA allowance looked after, free of management fees for a year if you transfer over £10,000. Visit moneyfarm.com. Your capital is at risk. Money Farm is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Divorce. It threatens the things you've worked hard for in more ways than you can imagine. Your home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. Don't let divorce cost you any more than it has to. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
Why wait for tomorrow when you could drive away in your next car today? At Car Giant, we make buying a car easy. With up to 10,000 cars in stock, all in one location, find the car that's right for you and drive it home the very same day. Giant choice, giant savings. Book your test drive now at cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
The Supreme Court have told John Platt, a parent from the Isle of Wight, that it was actually wrong and he should pay a fine for taking his daughter out of school for a week during term time, despite the fact that Platt's daughter was doing well at school and had a very high attendance record. And it provokes strong emotions on both sides. Ruth says to me on text, Nigel, this is not the schools telling parents how to bring their children up. It is a defiant parent who chooses to ignore school term dates. OK, Ruth, but let me give you a counter-argument. Counter-argument is that when it comes particularly to half-terms, what happens to the price of flights during half-term? What happens to, whether it's, crossing Eurotunnel? What happens to hotels? It all goes through the roof. So it's a lot cheaper to go for a week before or to go for a week after. And there are plenty of people out there who've got kids who are genuinely hard up. I'm not talking about parents who, take their kids off 3 or 4 times a year and have got plenty of money. I'm talking about people who are genuinely hard up. And it strikes me that this is pretty rough and pretty tough on them. And so they're likely to be fined £60, which is the average. Some areas it could be higher. But it'll be £60 per parent. Mind you could argue, I suppose, some of the flights could be cheaper, so you could look at it lots of different ways. The French have a very clever way of dealing with this. So the February half-term, midwinter, the French go skiing in just huge industrial numbers. So what do? Around France, they stagger that half-term holiday, so different departments and regions of France have their half-term at different times, staggered out over a 3-week period, which I think, if market forces do genuinely work, means a much more reasonable cost and much more accessibility for a bigger number of families to go skiing, whether it's for a week or a long weekend or whatever it may be. Could that perhaps be part of the answer? Could we have different counties having slightly different holidays? Or would that be a nightmare for the parent who's got a kid in Sussex and a kid at school in Kent? I don't know. I'm trying to find some reasonable, sensible solutions, but I do think that money probably has a lot to do with this. That's my suspicion. I wonder what Mick in Keston thinks. Mick, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Just a very quick one, which I wasn't going to say, but based on what you've just said, are you turning onto the side of the Europeans now? You like the French way of doing things?
Well, there's so much, Mick. There's so much, Mick, we can learn.
That was humorous.
No, I liked it. There's so much we can learn from Europe. I just don't want to be governed by them. If you've got a spare,
I totally agree.
If you've got a spare 30 seconds, Mick, have a look at LBC's website and look look at the reaction to me in the European Parliament yesterday. So I'm not very popular over there. But no, but Nick, just struck me that was quite a sensible way of organising that half-term break that occurs in late February. That was all.
But Nigel, at the end of the day, we have to have rules, and I don't think it's got anything to do with the state thinking they can bring up children better than the parents. But if I can just pose a question to you.
Yeah.
If you didn't have rules and regulations on attendance at school, what do you think a lot of the parents in this country would do? The kids would not even attend school. Now, whether you say 90% attendance gives you the right to take the kid out for the other 10%, that would be poor because it would just disrupt schools. So at the end of the day, you have to sort of try and attain 100% attendance. And if you give many, many parents in this country the opportunity to buck the system, they will buck the system. And I'm afraid life is all about money, finances, and managing your finances. If you can't afford to go on holiday, and I feel sad if you can't, but if you can't afford to go on holiday within the rules of the education or of any system, really, then you have to try and arrange things otherwise.
Mick, I'm not advocating a complete free-for-all, otherwise the whole thing wouldn't work, would it? And I get that, and I understand that. What I am arguing is that whether a kid has a couple of days off, a long weekend, or maybe even a week, and it happens once and doesn't happen again for several years, that is not the only measure of whether that person is a good, responsible parent. There are circumstances. Yeah, there is money, Mick, but there's also shift work. There is also, you're working in a small company. Can you actually get that time off? All I'm saying, Mick, is I think the fact this has gone all the way to the Supreme Court, frankly, is ridiculous. It does look like the big brother state telling us what we can and can't do. And what is wrong with leaving this in the hands of the headmasters and headmistresses? That's really my point, Mick.
Well, I agree, but I think we both agree on the fact there has to be rules and restrictions, and people have to adhere to them. How it's got all the way to the costly Supreme Court, I really have no idea. That is probably a travesty.
Because a government department have decided that they do not want to give way to this rather articulate father from the Isle of Wight. Mick, I thank you very much indeed. On Facebook, now I said it was devolved this, didn't I? Irene says, we're OK in Wales. Parents are allowed 10 days in a term to take their kids on holidays. Irene, I think that is far more liberal than I was suggesting, but if that's how they do it in Wales, that's how they do it in Wales. That's what devolution is. Dean says on Facebook, it's a disgrace that the government needs to get onto these travel agents and say they cannot put up prices during half-term. Dean, market forces, if more people want to buy a ticket, the price goes up. If fewer people want to buy a ticket, the price goes down. And I'm afraid it's been sort of happening like that since the dawn of time. It's called market forces. And if the government was to sort of try and interfere and set travel prices and hotel prices, it would be a complete mess. Adam says, simple solution. Adam's got it for us. If you want to take your child out of school during term time, then they must take the schoolwork they would miss with them. Yeah, Adam, brilliant. Just won't work, that's all. Trying to make kids do homework's tough enough, let alone making them do schoolwork on holiday. They're going to Disneyland. Are they really going to be doing that much homework? They're full of fizzy drinks and goodness knows what else. Lovely idea, hopelessly impractical, simply won't work. Ronnie in Aberdeen, would you take your kids on holiday during term time?
Yes, and I have done.
Right.
We used to meet up with my English friends there in Stoke. We're in Aberdeen.
Yes.
But what we'd do is we would go on holiday just before the Scottish schools broke up, because then it was even cheaper. So Scotland goes on holiday about 3 weeks before the English holidays. So it's miles cheaper. So I think part of the blame, to add to this, is the travel agents.
Well, a previous point was made there, Ronnie, but I did counter that by saying that market forces are what they are, and there isn't much we can really do to change that. Interesting there, Ronnie, your point that your friends were in Stoke and you're in Scotland, and there were different holiday times, which meant somebody had to have their kids if you wanted to go away together.
Yeah.
So what?
The friends in Stoke, they would sometimes get fined.
Yep.
Whereas in Aberdeen, we would just tell the head teacher that we're going on holiday, and sometimes they would say, oh, well, take a book and maybe the boys could catch up, which you knew wouldn't happen. But
quite.
later on, when they were at secondary school, and they would say, no, it's okay, because for a week before, we just have to sit and watch videos. The teachers don't want to do anything. And the children's gripe was, oh, we have to watch 12 videos because, of course, they couldn't put on 15s or something that they would maybe watch. So they were bored watching that as well.
Ronnie, I have to say, your story has completely blown out of the water my practical suggestion at 7:15, where I said if we staggered holidays around the country, it would solve the problem. You've just proved, actually, it wouldn't help at all. And I thank you for proving me as wrong as you did and for being as honest as you were about the way you've operated within that system. I'm going to ask Hugo in Wimbledon, was that a reasonable Supreme Court judgment?
Hi, Nigel. I'm a sort of middle ground here in the way.
Yep.
And by that, I mean that I think that, parents typically do have the best interests of their children at heart. But, I mean, it's only a £60 fixed penalty, so why not just do it anyway whenever you want? And then, you're still going to be miles ahead, because if you have your holiday in the term time, the difference in price between that and doing it when the kid's at school, or vice versa, you mean, is you're probably going to save £1,000. So paying £60 per kid to come out of school, you're going to be £900 ahead anyway. So why not just do that rather than dragging it through 2 years of court cases and just pay your fine? You're ahead anyway, so it's not like you're hard up.
Well, as you say, if it's a £60 fine, but you've saved several hundred on your hotels and flights for the family, some people might think it's actually rather a good bargain, Hugo.
It is an absolute bargain.
Yeah, and you pay within 28 days, so you don't get a higher fine or finish up in real trouble. Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that, but I just sort of wonder. I just wonder, Hugo, this is all about headmasters and headmistresses exercising discretion, isn't it? That's what it's really all about, because they know the parents that actually, organise their kids, encourage their kids, support their kids. And I'm quite sure that in the vast majority of cases, a parent goes along and says, look, we're pretty hard up. This is the one time we're ever going to go to Disneyland. Is it okay if we take that week off? And I just wonder whether this judgment, Hugo, will make that headmaster or headmistress a bit less reluctant to make a reasonable decision. Thank you very much for your call. Jenny says, why don't the rules apply to private education? Again, it's one rule for the rich and one rule for the poor. Well, there's a bit of truth in that. Ben says, I was given extra homework when I was taken out of school for 3 weeks back in 2000. What Ben doesn't tell us is whether he actually did it or not. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
A father who lost a legal case at the Supreme Court over taking his daughter out of school during term time has told LBC the state shouldn't tell people how to parent. John Platt had refused to pay a fine for taking her to the United States outside of school holidays. The Syrian government has denied any involvement in a chemical weapons attack which killed at least 80 people. It happened on Tuesday in Idlib province. And the Prime Minister has warned the EU that the sovereignty of Gibraltar is not up for negotiation in the Brexit talks. Theresa May has been meeting the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, at Downing Street. LBC weather. Dry and cloudy overnight, a low of 5 Celsius. Good sunny spells tomorrow, some light rain in the far northwest, a high of 17 degrees.
LBC Travel. Good evening, I'm Andy Lake. Well, long delays on the anti-clockwise M25 in Surrey. You're crawling from the M3, beg your pardon, all the way to the A3 after a collision around Leatherhead earlier on. All the lanes have reopened, but there are still bad queues for now. Elsewhere on the M25, a lane is closed clockwise in Hertfordshire, between junction 24 for Potters Bar and 25 for the A10 at Enfield. That's after a string of incidents, actually. In London, the South Circular is queuing northbound approaching Kew Bridge because of the works there. Into Northamptonshire now, the M1 is down to just one lane from 3 northbound between junctions 15 and 15A. A car's caught fire there tonight. And in Cheshire, the M6 is slow northbound after a collision earlier on between junction 18 for Holmes Chapel and junction 19 for Knutsford. All lanes are back open there, though. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
Q the big sale at Network Q, the best place for approved used Vauxhalls. Q the finance with 7.9% APR representative. Q the savings with a big £500 deposit contribution. And Q the extras with 1 year's roadside assistance and 1 year's warranty. Q the big sale at your local Vauxhall Network Q retailer between the 7th and 24th of April. Personal contract purchase. Finance subject to status. 18 plus T's and C's apply. Finance provided by Vauxhall Finance. Available on selected models at participating retailers.
An amazing kitchen. An amazing bathroom. An amazing hallway. At Amazing Tiles, our range of porcelain, ceramic and bespoke tiles can make any home amazing. Right now, buy 5 metres or more of plain tiles and get a third off the retail price. Visit our showroom and warehouse at Park Royal Road, London, or call 0208 83 84 900. Make your home amazing at amazingtiles.com.
Here at the Claims Guys, we'd like to offer this assurance to anyone worried by the deadline on PPI claims. There is still time to make your claim. Our experts will work fast to discover if you were ever sold PPI. And once we've completed your free PPI check, you can then pursue your own claim or let us do it for you. It's your choice. Even if you can't find any paperwork, just text the word EASY to 60777 and let the Claims Guys do the rest. Text EASY to 60777 now.
The Claims Guys.
Selling is just as easy as buying on eBay.
Amy, come and help me clear some stuff out of Dave's garage. He goes through all these phases. He collected so many albums before we got married.
Vinyl records.
Then he started doing DIY for about a month.
Power tools.
Next, he wanted something to play at weekends.
Golf clubs.
And I don't know what got into him when he started wearing these.
Wrestling tights. With millions of buyers ready and waiting, there's no better place for you to sell than eBay, the ultimate clear-out-the-garage shop.
If you own a Swiss watch and it's time to sell it, speak to watches.co.uk. The whole process runs like clockwork. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega and more. It only takes a couple of ticks and we pay immediately. Or if you just fancy a change, we could take yours in part exchange. From time on your hands to money in your pocket, it couldn't be easier with watches.co.uk. The pre-owned Swiss watch specialist.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
If you take your kids out of term time on holiday, you are going to get a fixed penalty notice. You are going to be in some trouble, regardless whether, more broadly than that, you're a good or a bad parent. And I'm asking whether you think that ruling that came from the Supreme Court today that said it's quite wrong to do it virtually in all circumstances, whether that's a sensible and fair ruling. But before I come back to that, I'm going to have to say a word, I think, about UKIP, which you will have seen is in the news today. In 2014, we just won the European elections. We had forced David Cameron into promising he would give us a referendum if he ever formed a majority government, and we were in a very, very good place. And two Conservative MPs, Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless, both defected to us, but did so honourably. Because they'd shifted parties, they resigned as MPs, they held by-elections, they let their constituents judge whether they'd done the right thing or not. I thought it was an absolutely wonderful, refreshing, exciting thing to be a part of. We were giving that trust back to the people in the kinds of men and women that get involved in politics. Since that time, we've seen Douglas Carswell, the man who has campaigned for recall, meaning if 20% of the constituency say they want a by-election because they're dissatisfied with the MP, they should have it. Mr Carswell, who always said if he shifted parties he would hold a by-election as a matter of honour, is now sitting as an independent and won't call a by-election. And as for Mark Reckless, well, he won that Rochester seat. He then lost that Rochester seat in a general election. He was elected on a list, not as Mark Reckless. People voted for UKIP in South East Wales, and a couple of our people got elected. And frankly, for him to say today, well, what he wanted to do was join the Tories, but they won't have him. So he's now going to sit as an independent with the Tory group. So I guess probably his political career and reputation is pretty fully washed up today. And I have to say, for Mark to think that you can be elected on a list and, without it being you, and you can take that seat with you anywhere, I think is a really wholly dishonourable and deeply disappointing thing for him to have done. Do these people have any idea just how much contempt politicians are held in by millions of people out there? And the actions of these two in the last week has confirmed that. I suppose in one way it's a good thing they've left UKIP, if that's how they think, and we can get on with the job. And I suspect UKIP has got a lot more to do over the course of the next few years. OK, your messages, texts and tweets. I'm very disappointed in you, Nigel. This one starts. Well, you're not alone in that. It is down to the head teacher. Mr. Platt didn't even bother to ask. It is not a human right for children to have a holiday. Anonymous. Well, OK, you know, Mr. Platt was wrong in that, and I get that, and I understand that, but I don't think anybody would argue, that aside, that he was one of those people that you would call a bad parent. Interesting one here on Twitter. Reality check for all. No more long school holidays. Make schools holidays in total 5 weeks a year. Then kids can take holes as there's more time in school anyway. You know, I think a lot of parents actually would agree with that. That's from Janie Buggs. A lot of people would agree with that because actually for a lot of working parents, you know, both the husband and wife are working, school holidays are a problem. What on earth do you do with the children? Who's going to look after them? Are they going to get themselves into even more trouble than they naturally would? Can't afford an expensive holiday in August? Book a cheaper staycation in the UK. Parents are whining because they can't have a fortnight in Majorca in August. Cut your cloth, Paul in Croydon. Paul, I do understand your sentiments, but I'm afraid you really have missed here completely. It's not August we're talking about because the schools are on holiday in August, and yeah, Majorca in August is probably quite expensive. Point raised here. If this father is considering sending his daughter to a private school, then he can afford to take her on holiday in the school holiday dates. Well, I don't know whether that's true or not, and it may well have been. At the time he had no money, or it may well have been because of work. He couldn't get any other time off. You know, there are no hard and fast rules for this. It isn't simple. It isn't straightforward. Schools should be fined when teachers have days off. They always did at my school. Well, look, I don't know. I really don't know. There is no easy answer to this other than there are good parents and bad parents. And taking your kid out on a one-off basis does not of its own qualify you as a bad parent that needs to be served with a fixed penalty notice. The state does not always know best. Not even the Supreme Court, in my opinion. Patrick and Stroud will agree or disagree with that.
I think on this particular chap, Nigel, he's got it right. Because 92% attendance means that his child took a day off school practically every other week. Now, if you came to work for me and you took a day off work every other week, I'd fire you very, very quickly. But I took my children out of school just before the Easter holidays to take them to Disneyland a few years ago. I made the school aware months in advance that I was going to do it. I told the kids that they can't pull sick days when they're not sick, and they worked really, really hard to make sure that even when they felt a little bit under the weather, they went to school. And
Patrick, that was a one-off holiday, yeah?
Yes, one-off holiday that we, as a family, wouldn't have been able to necessarily afford otherwise.
Yes.
Because we were looking at about £3,000 and more to go the following week. So we went the week before the Easter holiday.
Sorry, are you saying you saved £3,000?
£3,000 to go the week after when you look at the extra cost, Eurostar, the hotels, and everything involved in it. We booked it all independently so that we could afford it at the time, and £3,000 extra to go the following week was just absolutely ridiculous.
OK, so you feel fully justified in having done what you've done, but you did inform the head of the school. And even if you had, Patrick, been given a £60 fixed penalty notice, it wouldn't have really mattered very much, would it?
And there was 3 separate schools my children go to.
Yes.
I informed all 3 schools. My other half didn't want to get involved in that, so I went to the schools and I told them. And every single one of them said, we're not going to authorise it, but as long as the attendance is all right, you know, the likelihood of you receiving a fine is pretty slim. So this guy's received a fine because his child takes a day off school every other week.
Yeah, so, Patrick, I think your story is very interesting because you said it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip for the kids. You saved £3,000 in doing it. I did say earlier I thought money probably was a big motivation in all of this, and I thank you very much indeed for your call. Alan in Fleet, what do you think of this ruling? Is it fair? Is it reasonable?
I think, Nigel, the issue the chaps have just been touching on, I think it's not the monetary fine. I think the point is that the schools are issuing a fine. The state is saying, this is wrong, you are not allowed to do this. That is my concern with this, because as a UKIP person, you would be in favour of smaller state, more reliance on individuals making their choices, doing the right thing. Now, if the state are saying, and you can't do this, there will be no discretion with heads, because they will not be able to go against the LEAs or the relevant ruling educational authorities, because this is now set in law. So surely, is this not an example of where the European Court of Human Rights should be brought into play?
Oh, no, don't.
It's there for the right to a family life.
Oh, don't spoil my evening, Alan. I mean, I thought we were trying to get away from all that stuff. Well, the trouble with the European Court of Human Rights, and by the way, let's just be clear that the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg is the European Union's court. The European Court of Human Rights is a slightly separate entity that is based in Strasbourg. The trouble with the European Court of Human Rights, Alan, is if you take a case there, it takes years to get it heard. Do you know what? I actually think we're good enough to get this stuff sorted out in our own country, even if not every ruling we make is one that we agree with. But you clearly think there's a case of taking it there under the right to a family life, yeah?
Well, I think there would be, because at the moment I see it that the court have made this decision. I don't think the head teachers will have any option other than to impose fines. And it's not the monetary value of the fine, it's the fact that the state is saying to you, as a parent, you are not allowed to do this, you are not doing a good job.
Yeah, well, that's the bit
where they're imposing on family life.
And that's the bit that jars with me. Alan, you make a very good point. Maybe this will go to Strasbourg, because whilst we're leaving the European Union, I haven't heard Theresa May say we're leaving the European Court of Human Rights. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. I'm going to go to Dave on Facebook, who says, can we get the Supreme Court to organise all the holiday firms to cap the prices so that they're the same all the year round? Dave, this would make the state even bigger, wouldn't it? Imagine the state is in charge of holidays and prices and plane tickets and train tickets. It isn't going to happen. Market forces do exist out there. Katie says on Facebook, well, for a start, it costs just as much to go away in the UK. Camping prices this year have gone through the roof. Interesting. I must say, I do see an enormous number, not so much of caravans, but camper vans. The number of camper vans I see on the road now during the summer in this country, they clearly have exploded. So Katie argues that actually, whether you stay here for a staycation or you go abroad, whenever you go, you're probably going to feel at the end of it financially you were stitched up anyway. On top of that, you'd rather not have 60 quid in the form of a fixed penalty notice. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
Jeremy Corbyn is promising free school meals for primary school children, paid for by putting VAT on private school fees. Does that sound like a good plan?
Clive Bull on LBC.
You can earn more with a degree.
And you can get a degree in just 2 years with a course at GSM London.
Degrees are awarded by Plymouth University, and if you don't have a formal qualification, you can start on our foundation year.
Places are available for June at our Greenford and Greenwich campuses.
Enroll now. Text GSM to 66777
or visit gsmlondon.ac.uk.
GSM London.
Have bold dreams.
When it comes to finding something new, you can start the conversation at Hello You. Sign up and browse profiles for free at helloyoudating.com and start the conversation today.
Q the big sale at Network Q, the best place for approved used Vauxhalls. Q the finance with 7.9% APR representative. Q the savings with a big £500 deposit contribution. And Q the extras with 1 year's roadside assistance and 1 year's warranty. Q the big sale at your local Vauxhall Network Q retailer between the 7th and 24th of April. Personal contract purchase. Finance subject to status. 18 plus T's and C's apply. Finance provided by Vauxhall Finance. Available on selected models of participating retailers.
Here at the Claims Guys, we'd like to offer this assurance to anyone worried by the deadline on PPI claims. There is still time to make your claim. Our experts will work fast to discover if you were ever sold PPI. And once we've completed your free PPI check, you can then pursue your own claim or let us do it for you. It's your choice. Even if you can't find any paperwork, just text the word EASY to 60777 and let the Claims Guys do the rest. Text EASY to 60777 now.
The Claims Guys.
This is the lovely sound of a man's beard being played like a harp. It's Dave the mechanic's beard, and this soothing facial melody is the U-Team's way of telling Dave that his garage's water bills could be a lot lower, thanks to business water deregulation in England. Groovy, huh? The U-Team from UtilityWise has all the skills to manage your bills and play the beard harp. Go to utilitywise.com/water or text water to 62277 to save up to 25% on your utility bills. Tax-free savings based on water plus gas or electricity combined.
Ladies and gentlemen, BT's 14-day unmissable sale is now on. Save £150 over 12 months when you go for fibre optic unlimited infinity and unlimited UK weekend calls with TV. It comes with the UK's most powerful Wi-Fi versus major broadband providers. But hurry, BT's 14-day unmissable sale must end on Monday the 10th of April. Visit bt.com/sale to find out more today.
Price and content may change. New BT Infinity and BT TV customers 12-month term. £150 savings versus previous combined 12-month new customer subscription prices. Calls up to 1 hour to standard UK landlines. Read out to avoid charges. Subject to availability. Minimum line speed and PC spec. Pay by direct debit. Exclusions and terms apply.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
The Supreme Court ruled that it's not right to take your kid out of school during term time to go on holiday, regardless of your circumstances and regardless, actually, whether you're generally a good parent engaged with your child's education or not. Shakita says to me on texts, I'd pay the fine in £1 bi-weekly instalments. That's really helpful, isn't it? Travel far more educates people than a few days in school ever will, one of my tweeters says. I took my children out of school for 3 years. They were ahead when they went back. Happiest 3 years. That's from home education. I did mention home education earlier. It is growing in America. And I have a tweet here from somebody who describes himself as ultra-old Brexiteer. And he says, this would have meant my family would never have had a holiday as my wife and I worked during school holidays. So there is no absolute right and wrong with any of this, is there? I mean, there are almost as many different examples as there are children in the country. You know, it's not a straightforward one. Now, our next caller, I could say, was Chris from Harlow, but his name's not Chris, and he's not from Harlow, but he has been involved in a big dispute with a school, and he won't tell us who he is or what the school is. But, Chris, just explain to me what you've been through, please.
Hello, Nigel. Right, so I took my daughter out of school in October to go on a family holiday. I have trouble in getting time off at the appropriate time. But the thing is, I do believe that there should be rules about this sort of thing, and I went into it open-minded that I was going to get fined. And I told the headmaster, and basically, you know, it's accepted, OK, it will have to be unauthorised leave. And lo and behold, I then get, basically myself and my wife get a £60 fine each.
Yep.
So I pay it. You know, because in the day, I knew this was coming, and I accept the rules. I've broken them, but I had a holiday. So no problems there. But then what that did, you see, is that it put my daughter's attendance percentage sort of down. So I then sort of keep coming up on the attendance computer-generated record that, you know, my daughter's attendance is appalling. Now, the thing is, she's got a younger sister who's just started nursery. So, of course, she's bringing home every sort of illness under the sun at the moment. Right. And, of course, my daughter who had the time off, she's been getting ill. She's been picked up the, you know, winter vomiting bug. And, you know, so we then ring the school up and we said, look, you know, she's got this bug. I'm worried about her attendance. Oh, well, you've got to keep her off. You've got to keep her off for at least 48 hours, you know.
Yeah.
I said, all right, fine. Get a doctor's note, fine. Send her in with the doctor's note. They lose the doctor's note. Meanwhile, I'm then getting further letters. I'm very concerned about her attendance, and it's culminated in sort of a phone call to my wife recently, where they want us to go in and see them for a little chat with their attendance panel. And you know, I've sort of taken this quite badly. But what really did it for me was when the person on the other end of the phone said to my wife, "We're viewing this as very suspicious."
Oh wow!
My wife is
How
saying,
lovely!
My wife is brilliant, isn't it? And my wife is saying, "Well, look, hold on a minute. Every leave that she'd had, you have got documented with doctor's records." "Oh no, we haven't." "Yes, you have actually." And what's getting me upset really is just these people are just.
Well,
it's not
the trouble is, Chris. The trouble is, your name is on a list. You're on a list.
I know.
You're on a bad boy list. And so anything that happens there hereafter, however innocent, gives the authorities the chance to crack down upon you. I mean, how did you view this ruling today that came from the Supreme Court?
I'm in two minds about it, really. I mean, to be honest, I do think that there has to be rules and that they are there. I don't agree with your colleague James O'Brien's view of things this morning. I thought his discussion with that Anna from Biggin Hill, the way he spoke to her was absolutely appalling. That's a different matter. But, you know, look, I think the thing that was wrong about the whole scenario today was that I'm of the opinion, look, you've broken a rule, pay the bill. It shouldn't be getting to the Supreme Court. That's just me. I knew I was in the wrong. I paid the bill. But the other thing is that it's all right, and I think the sort of it should be down to case-by-case basis and the headmasters and what have you. But what makes me laugh, the schools then have had far more teacher training days than my daughters had on the no one mentions anything about that.
Chris, your call is fascinating, and it does, I think, show the dangers of being on a list. And I hope you find and I'm sure you will find a sensible, peaceable resolution with the school. And thank you very much indeed for calling in. Carl in Tunbridge Wells, was it a reasonable ruling?
Hi, Nigel. No, I agree with the ruling. I think it's absolutely right. I think having children is about having sacrifices. I never went abroad when I was a kid. I never had the opportunity. I still have fantastic holidays. I went to like Dorset and Bournemouth and all these sort of things, and they're only during the 6-week holiday breaks and stuff that I got. So I think it's too much entitlement. I think that people just need to accept it. They've got 18 years to bring up their child responsibly. They sacrifice those 18 years, and then when the child leaves the nest and that, they can take a lovely holiday and do whatever they want. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, no, Carl, you know, that's a perfectly reasonable point of view. But you know, not all of these people, not all of the 20,000 cases that were brought last year against parents for their kids not being at school when the school deems they should have been, were people going off to Disneyland Paris or Florida or to see the pyramids or whatever it may be. A lot of them would have been going away in the United Kingdom when, yes, campsites are cheaper. When, yes, you know, getting travel probably will be cheaper, and when the parents can actually get time off work, Carl. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I understand. But again, I said it's still about sacrifice. When you have that child, you make that decision. You make the decision to take the child off. My dad used to work nights. I didn't used to see my dad a lot during the weekdays and that. But he still managed to, you know, I still had a fantastic upbringing. I still had great holidays and that. And I think that, you know, market, as you said, the market dictates the cost of the holidays. But that's how the businesses make their money. No. They've got their peak times, and that's when they make their money. So that's just I think it's the nature of the beast, personally.
Do you know what, Carl? I've seen with my kids, actually, you can be in North Cornwall, it can be a beautiful day, it can be blowing a gale and raining. When they've got a wetsuit on a bodyboard or a surfboard, they're as happy there as they would be anywhere in the world. That's been my experience of it, but, you know, we all look at these things differently. Carl, I thank you very much for your call. Tweet here from Pat Peeve, who says, the same parents will complain when Johnny falls behind his classmates, blaming teachers because they are not spending time on him. I'm quite sure there are some parents in this category who have total disregard for schools, for discipline, for turning up on time and everything, but they're the ones, OK, there has to be some form of sanction against them. And I get that. And if their kids are consistently truant and all the rest of it, then for the sake of the children, there has to be an intervention point. But my argument is, this ruling, sort of, to me, seems to rather take away discretion from headmasters and headmistresses, and I'm not sure that's very bright and very sensible. Mark on Facebook says, this law is breaking a basic human right. It shouldn't matter about holiday prices or whatever. It's a parent's human right to make decisions. Well, I think in the end, Mark, there are many callers, texters and tweeters who do actually see today as being a bit of a battle of the individual, the parent, against the state. I'm going to go, my last call tonight, to Shay from Southampton. Was this the right ruling?
Hi there, Nigel.
Hello.
I'd just like to start with saying that I agree with the decision, despite the vague rules. But a couple of things that bugged me were that they stated there were some exemptions. One of those being the for a bereavement.
Yes.
Which I totally
of course
get and I agree with.
Yeah.
The other one which bugged me was the religious duties and religious celebrations.
Yeah.
So you can take your child out of school for religious reasons, but you can't because you want to spend a bit of time with them. I mean, for a small holiday.
Yeah, it depends. I guess it depends a little bit, Shay, what those religious reasons are and what they actually mean by that. Because, of course, we're obviously talking about non-Christian religions, aren't we? Who have different.
Well, we've got another vague area there, I believe.
So I guess that's what they're talking about, and I guess they want to be sensitive on issues like that. Shay, you make a point very, very well indeed. Bereavements have not cropped up over the course of the last hour. I don't think anyone's going to argue about that. Look, of course there need to be rules. Of course we want our kids to have good education. But I do think when you get a pretty blanket ruling coming out of the UK Supreme Court, such as today's did, it sends a message to headmasters and headmistresses that basically they should not exercise too much discretion, because the Supreme Court have ruled you should not take your kid out of term time to go on holiday. And I think what we've seen tonight is there are so many different circumstances. It's difficult to have a blanket rule. And I felt sorry for that anonymous caller who took his child out, informed the head he was going to do it, then the child gets ill, and suddenly he's potentially in real trouble. Shows the danger of giving the state or authorities anywhere ever too much power. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back on Monday at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive.